Hi guys, welcome back to the shop. Hey, I'm going to get back on the AT-1 MX build. Today I'm going to go over some preliminary measurements for the case and the crankshaft, and we may get a little further than that, but I want to get into that and just show why it's important when you're setting up your crankshaft to measure it, and why the measurement is important. So let me get you overhead here and I'll show you what I'm talking about. Okay, let's take a look at this, the cases here. Kind of what I'm trying to measure is I want to measure from this surface down to the bearing right here, the inner race on the bearing, and that needs to be that way. And of course, when you do this, you want to make sure your bearings are installed all the way. Probably the best way to measure this is to take a parallel like this, set it over and use a depth mic. I don't have a very good quality depth mic. I just don't use them very often. So what I'm doing is I'm getting as close as I can get. This is, I can't do 10 thousandths with this one. It's not set up for that. It's, I can only go to thousandths. So what I do is I set the parallel across the gasket surface here, and then measure down to that surface. And I'm actually getting about let's see, I'm measuring 2.131 is what I'm coming up with this one. But now we have to subtract the thickness of the parallel, which is 1 inch. So that brings me down to, I've already kind of got this all set up here. I just want to show you what we're doing and how we're doing it. And what I ended up with after I subtract the inch is 1.131. And then I go ahead and I check the other side too. Actually, let me finish with this one and then I'll move it out of the way. What I did, my bore gauges are actually much more precise. These read into the 10 thousandths. So what I did was I went over and I set up my bore gauge, and I'll take you over and show you how I did that. Like I mentioned before, the sun and bore gauges are set up on a setting fixture, which actually incorporates a micrometer. And what you do is you put the bore gauge, in this case, into the nest, and you put in whatever measurement you want to measure. And in this case, since my measurement was about 1.131, I think it was, I just put in 1.130. And what you do is you just set it up over here and then zero out your dial bore gauge. So it's set up right now to measure exactly 1.130. So then we go back over to to where we're measuring, and I'll show you what we do there. Okay, then again we put the parallel over the bearing again, and I'm going to measure. I've got this tip on the inner race of the bearing, and this tip goes up against the parallel, and it's going to be real hard for me to show you what I'm doing here. Okay, so I'm 4/10,000ths less than my measurement. So I'm going to subtract that 4/10,000ths from my original depth mic reading. And then I actually do the same thing on the other side. Let me move this one out of my way. I need to invest in a better depth mic. I just don't use them that often, so it doesn't really justify it, I guess. And I can get it done this way. But here again, I'm doing the same thing. I'm still set up for the 1.130. And again, I go in and I measure this one, and I think you can still see the reading. I think I've hit something here. Let me go reset it. Yeah, I forgot to lock my gauge here. I probably hit it. Okay, so you can see we're going down to, it's kind of hard to stay on there. Okay, 2/2000ths and 4/10,000ths. Okay, so I take all those measurements into effect, and then I bring the crankshaft over, and I can't get a micrometer in here because of, well, it's just, there's not enough room. When I get down here, you can see that the micrometer is hitting right here, and it does the same thing if I go in this way. So there again, I'm kind of limited of how I can do this. They make micrometers, of course, that will span that, but I don't have one. So I've got to use my dowel caliper here, or digital caliper. And I'm reading 2.2044, looks like, maybe 5. And what I'm doing there, I can, if you remember right, I've got this raised area right here. This is probably the same height as this, but we can't say that for sure. So there's a cutout right here in the micrometer, and I'm trying to span. If I lean this back, you can see that that area falls into that area that has a cutout in it. So depending on where I'm at, I've got 2.2035, 2.2035, 2.2045, 2.035. So I think I'm just going to call it 2.204. That should get me pretty close. Okay, so what I've done is I've taken my mag side clearance that I got with the depth gauge, and this is the clutch side, this is the mag side. I've subtracted the inch on both sides from the parallel, and then I've gone in and I've added, in this case, almost 2 thousandths. It's 0.0017 to this side, which gives me an overall reading of 1.1307. And on the clutch side, I actually took away 4 thousandths, or 4 10,000ths, and I ended up with 1.1306. And then I'm figuring my crank at 2.204. Then I took both of these halves and added them together, and I ended up with a total of 2.2613. Then I subtracted the crankshaft, the 2.204, and that left me with my total clearance of 0.0573. Then the shims that came on the assembly, I had one at 24 thousandths and one at 20. So that leaves me a total clearance left of just a little over 13 thousandths. So you figure you've got about 5.5 or 6 on one side or the other. So that's, this is the way I've seen almost every one of them. There was one, actually it was the 175 that I just tore apart. I haven't put back together yet, but this one came with a, you can see the damage here, I think. On the inside, no damage. On the outside, quite a bit of damage. If you measure the total width, you're at about 26 thousandths. And if you measure where the damage is, you're down to about 23. So the ones that come in them normally are the 24 and the 20. You got the one that's 24. Give or take, I guess, there's 24. And the bigger one for the magneto side, and it's 20. That's what most of them are. This is the only one that I've ever seen that was thicker. Doesn't mean that there's not some, but this one here was apparently 26 thousandths at the beginning before it got worn. And then it actually wore to 23, 24, to what this one that the other one I'm showing you is. So that being said, I'm pretty confident that these are the two most used ones. I think the Yamaha parts breakdown does show some variations of this, but I'm not sure. I'll have to look. But anyhow, this is what I came up with. So with the shims in place, the crankshaft in place, we're showing 6.5 thousandths on either side. Now you can see why it's important before you take the crankshaft apart that you measure it. And it should be about the same out here, give or take. But you want to try to get as close to that final measurement when you're putting it back together also. And because if you tried to, you know, this would basically be, I don't know, 10 pounds of whatever, and you're trying to stuff it into 8 pounds of whatever, and it's not going to fit. You know, otherwise your cases are not going to go together all the way, or they may just really be wide. But I think the rod measurement here, your axial movement that you take the feeler gauge measurement on, would protect you from going too far. Either way, really, as long as you've got this set up according to your specs, I think you're going to be in the ballpark. You probably don't have to do all this measuring, as long as, you know, measure it before and measure it after. And like I say, I get variations all the way around here, but that's kind of 2.204 is about where I end up most of the time. So I'm pretty sure that if you put the shims on that came off of it, you're going to be okay. But it's not going to hurt you to check. But anyhow, that's what I came up with on this one. And as you saw, I had another set of cases over on the table. Let me take you over there a minute. Okay, these over here next to where my setup fixture is. And just for gee whiz, I went ahead and checked those out too. And this is an AT-1. This is just one I tore apart for some parts for the other one. And this is the measurements I got from it. Now, let me just set the other ones here next to it so you can kind of compare. On the one that I just tore apart, I started out at, well, let's just go to the final measurement, 11305 and 11307 on the one I'm building. So just a couple of 10,000ths. And I had on the clutch side 1.1304 versus 1.1306, and again just a couple of 10,000ths. The crankshaft, I actually measured this one 1,000ths bigger than what I averaged this one out to be. So when it was all said and done, I did all the same math, used the same shims. These are the same shims that came on the one I tore apart for parts, and this is what I come up with. So we're sitting right at 12 thousandths, 11 thousandths, and 9 10,000ths. And the one I'm building now is just a little bit wider at 0.133. So they're really close. I just can't see that you could go wrong by just, as long as you got your crankshaft close to what it was, I don't think you're going to have any problems just sliding the new crank assembly together and putting the original shims on and going back to it. So I just don't see a problem there. So there you go, guys. I've never actually done this before, but I was curious and I just wanted to know. I've always just put them back together. I tried to get the as close as I could, the measurement on the width of the crankshaft, and just go back in with the original shims. And I've never had any trouble, but that doesn't mean that, you know, somebody won't, or maybe that I just never have, it wasn't bad enough to mess with anything. But there you go again. It's just it's one of those gee whiz things. I think I have done several of them here lately just to kind of keep my curiosity in check and to see what I'm actually messing with. But the one thing that you need to make sure of is that you have your crankshaft as close as possible to the starting width, and you want to make sure that your crankshaft bearings are installed fully into the pocket here. And everything else should be good as long as those two things are good. All right, I just checked the book and they do list different ones. The magneto side, there's only one available. So it's not the same as it's actually listing. It's listing a, let's see here. I've got the book here. The magneto side is the 12, and it's showing just one, and it's showing a 0.3 millimeter in thickness, and that is not what I have here. I'm showing it as a 0.5. So I'm not sure what that's about, but they only list the one. Now, it looks like they're adjusting the clearance on the clutch side, number 15, and in there they list a 3, a 4, a 5, a 6, a 7, and an 8, 0.8 or 0.3 through 0.8 millimeter. So I went on to Rocky Mountain site and on Partzilla site, and none of these are available. So you're kind of stuck with what you got. And in this case, I was measuring them, of course, in thousands, but in millimeters, the one that I have is a 6, a 0.6. So I've never had any trouble as long as my crankshaft was put together the right thickness, you know, the right measurement this way. I always try to get them the same as what they were when I took them out, and I think as long as you do that, more than likely you can get by with your standard spacers, shims, as long as your bearings are fully inserted. So, that being said, my curiosity got me on this, and I just wanted to know what they were set up at. So I had this other engine I just pulled apart. I had this one that I'm getting ready to put together, and I just went ahead and did the best check that I could with the equipment I've got, and they're both of them measured out very close, and I'm satisfied that Yamaha is probably wanting about 5 to 6 thousandths on each side. That's what my guess is. So take that for what it's worth. So if you're wondering yourself, or if you're not finding any information, which I have not, it tells me in the manuals I have, which is this, straight from Yamaha, to install the shims and install the crankshaft. Doesn't say anything about a clearance or anything. But in the one case that I had on the 175, you could definitely see some wear on the one shim, and that's and it was a thicker shim to start with. What did I do with that? Let's see what this one measured in millimeters. I already gave you the now this is probably a 7. It's measuring, oh wait a minute. Yeah, it's measuring closer to 7. but it wore to closer to 6. And there again, you can see the wear here. Nothing on the inside, just on the out. Okay, I think I've just about beat this one to death. Okay, you know, sometimes my curiosity just engulfs my mind, I guess, and I've got to figure something out, or I'm just not going to be able to go on with things. And this was kind of bothering me. I thought about it several times over the years, and I just never knew, and I didn't have any of the information. If somebody has that information in maybe a bulletin or something from Yamaha, that would be great. I'd love to know what it's supposed to be. You know, drop me a comment, or you can go to the About page on YouTube, and my email address is there, so you can shoot me an email if you want to. I would really like to know. But by going with the ones that I've taken apart and just doing these two, measuring everything, that's what it looks like. Maybe about 5/1000ths a side. So 5/6, something like that. Anyhow, thanks for going along the ride, and we'll talk to you next video.